I'm Debbie from So Easy, and today we're going to be sewing the Flirty Skirt. Now the pattern piece for this is very simple, but it's very different to some of the other patterns that I've prepared for you because this one doesn't include any seam allowances. The reason for that, normally if you sew a skirt or a dress, there'll be maybe a seam down the back, maybe side seams, and if you're a little bit off in your seams, it's not that critical. But with this one, this skirt is made up of 10 individual panels, and each panel of course has a seam on either side, so that's 20 seams. And if you're a little bit out with those seams, then over the course of 20 seams, that's going to make a big difference in your sizing. So if I set up the pattern piece with a 1/2 inch seam allowance and you sewed a 1/4, the skirt would be far too big. If I set it up with a 1/4 inch seam allowance and you sewed a 1/2, the skirt would be far too small. Therefore, I've set the pattern up so that you are going to add in your own personal seam allowances, and therefore your fit will be right. So first of all, set out your pattern, print it and sellotape it together, and then down the side seam, which is the seam just here, you need to add your own personal seam allowance. Now this is going to be a knit pattern for me, so I'm going to sew and overcast at the same time, and I've checked what my sewing machine does, and that's about 1/4 inch. So I've added a 1/4 inch down here. If you prefer to add a 1/2 inch, then of course draw on your 1/2 inch seam allowance. You'll also need a seam allowance for the hemline here. I've included 1/2 inch. I'm just going to turn mine up once and stitch. So I've included 1/2 inch there. If you want a wider hem, then add on a wider amount. You don't need to add anything at the top. It already includes an allowance there for your elastic casing. So now I'm going to cut out up this side seam where I've added the seam allowance on. I'll cut out at the top. And according to the size chart, I am size D, so I'm going to be following this solid pink line. So this will make this pattern piece into my size if I follow that line here. And I'll cut top to bottom. And I'll cut along this hem at the bottom. And that's now 1/2 of the pattern piece prepared. Now push those scraps out the way, we don't need those. And I've made up a blank sheet of paper which is going to be wide enough to fit this pattern piece on. And taking a pen and a ruler, I just need to draw a straight line down here. This will be our centre line for the pattern piece, which also forms the grain line. So that's good here. And now we take the pattern piece that you've cut, line it up against this line here that you've drawn. That's going to be the centre. And then we need to draw around the pattern piece all the way, and we'll duplicate it, and it will include both the hem allowance at the bottom and the seam allowance on the side. So I'm just going to lightly tape mine in place just to make sure it's not going to move as I'm doing it. So I'll do that in the middle and the top and the bottom. Now I can draw around this pattern piece. Same for the hem at the bottom. And now it's done. Just need to open that out. And now I'll tape down the centre to add these two together. out on this line I've drawn. There we go. And now my pattern piece is good to go. It includes the custom seam allowances that I'm going to use. So by doing it this way, it makes sure your pattern piece is exactly the right size for you, and you should be able to get a very good fit on the skirt. So now we need to cut 10 pieces of fabric. So you just place it on your grain line, cut this out 10 times, or you can double your fabric over, obviously, place it and cut it 5 times. So our fabric is now all cut out and it's time to sew. I've cut mine out with a double layer of fabric and I've kept it right sides together, so I've ended up with 5 matching pairs. And so it's going to be very easy. I'm just going to take each matching pair, leave it right sides together as it already is, and I'm going to take my seam allowance and sew from top to bottom all the way on the right hand side of this one, and do the same for each. So then instead of 10 pieces I'll have 5, and both will be joined down the centre. So I'll do that first, and then we'll come back and look at the next step. So my 5 pairs are already sewn. So each one is now 2 pieces, and you can already see the shape of the skirt taking shape. So I've got another double piece here, and I'm just going to lie that on the top. And again, I'll match up the edges on the right hand side, and I'll sew those 2 together. And then when I open out, I'll have a piece with 4 panels. So then I'll take my next double, I'll add it on again over on the side, and then I'll have a piece with 6 panels. And so I'll carry on until I've got all of the 10 pieces joined together. And once they're joined together, it's just a case of putting the 2 final pieces in and sewing up the last seam to make a circle. So I'll do that, and then we'll come back and have a look and see how it looks. So once all of the panels are sewn in and the skirt is sewn into a complete circle, you can see the shape, and it's really pretty. It's going to be fitted in the waist down to the hips, and then it flares out after the hips so that it's nice and swishy and flirty when you walk, and yet it doesn't add any extra bulk or anything up at the top with any pleats or gathers. It's going to be nice and fit in there, so it's going to be a very flattering shape. But we need to add some elastic in at the waistband, and I have cut myself a piece of elastic. I've measured it around my waist to where I need, and I've just cut an extra 3 or 4 inches on the end because it's going to make it easier to work with that little bit of extra length. I'll put that aside for now. And now if we turn the skirt inside out, we just need to prepare a simple casing around this waist. So using your seam gauge or a tape measure, I'm just going to measure down and turn in 1.25 inches all the way around and pin in place. Once you've done that all the way, you'll have made a casing for your elastic, and just sew close to this edge. I'm actually going to do mine with a small zigzag stitch, so as I zigzag I'm going to catch the edge of this casing and just make it look nice and neat on the inside as well, and I'll do that all the way around. But when I get back to where I started, I'm going to leave about 2 inches which will be unsewn, and this is going to be the gap in the casing where I'll be able to feed the elastic in. So I will take care of that now. Sew all the way around, leaving a gap, and then we'll feed in our elastic. So now my casing is completed. I've got my piece of elastic, and I've just anchored it with a pin at this end because I don't want it to pull through by mistake before I'm ready. And you can either put a big safety pin or a big paper clip on this end and just feed the elastic through the casing. You want to make sure as you do it, you're going to keep it flat so that it's going to go through smoothly and it's not going to create any ripples or twists in the elastic. So I'm going to do that all the way through my casing till the elastic comes out the other end. I may need to just fiddle with it a little bit to make sure it's going to lie smoothly. So I'll meet you back in a minute when I've completed that. So now my elastic is pulled all the way through and I've overlapped on that line so that I know exactly what length of elastic I need, and this is a little bit extra that I had. Now I'm just going to stitch over here with a zigzag stitch to secure that elastic in place, and then I can snip off this extra bit that I don't need at the end. Then I'll just pull the elastic through into the casing, and where the casing is open just here, I'll then complete that last little bit of sewing and the waist will be completed. So our waistline is now completed. You'll see that although it has elastic in there, it's not looking overly gathered. It's not a really gathered skirt because it's already fitted around the waist and hips anyway. So the elastic is just there to hold it in place and stop the skirt falling off rather than to gather in any extra fabric. So now our last step is just to complete our bottom hem, and time to try your skirt on. Turn up whatever hem you would like. I added a small 1/2 inch hem to mine, so I'm just going to add a 1/2 inch turn up and hem around the bottom, and that will be my skirt completed. If you want a wider hem and maybe use a double needle, that would look very nice too. And then that's it. Once your hemline is completed, your Flirty Skirty is now ready to wear. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you've enjoyed making the skirt, and I look forward to seeing you again at So Easy.